Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. And from the LaRouche Foundation, we have Bill Roberts, who's also a candidate for Congress. And Bill, can you tell us, do you have a separate website besides the LaRouche PAC and LaRouchePUB.com, which is the EIR Executive Intelligence Review? Can you give us some information about your candidacy, which district, and then we'll get into all of the issues?
Yeah, my website's www.billrobertsforcongress.com. I'm a candidate for the 11th District Congressional seat, running in the Democratic primary, which is August the 5th. I'm a LaRouche Democrat. I ran 2 years ago and shocked many people by getting 41% of the vote, of the Democratic vote, 15,000 votes, very publicly calling for the impeachment of President Barack Obama, warning that the failure to impeach him would lead to further wars, such as in Syria or Iran, threatening to bring about a general war with Russia and China, which in fact I identified that he was being pushed to start by his controllers. I had also at that time identified that there was a directionality headed towards bail-in, just like the Dodd-Frank Act had brought in a bail-in regime by legislating the United States joining the countries that were going to allow banks to basically resolve their crises by simply shirking off the debt obligations that they had and stealing the money from people. Yeah, and identified that the same thing was going on in Detroit, and that if the city council did not stand up, they were going to be seeing a further attack and further attack on their constituents. So I'm now.
In other words, it's massive theft called bailing in. So which way? August 5th is the candidacy primary, right?
That's the primary.
Now, how do people get involved so they can donate to your candidacy? They go to billrobertscongress.com, and you have a donate button. What is the phone number to your congressional office?
Phone number here is 248-232-6981. Please call.
6981. And I'll repeat that again. 6981. That's 248-232-6981 for the congressional office.
That's right.
Let's talk about some of the issues, because these issues are all connected on the macro and micro level. We have Obama basically as a willing and evil puppet with the George Soros and the international bankers. What's really going on is the economic phase of World War III. And if we don't truncate it, it'll go from the economic phase to the proxy war phase to the global annihilation phase. And unfortunately, the people don't see the terror and the danger in this, that war really, as it's been prosecuted in World War I and II with our current technology, is obsolete. Because proxy wars with little nations like Syria eventually involve large allied nations like Russia, and it results in the thermonuclear annihilation of our cities. Biological weapons release, fuel air bombs, weather weapons, geotectonic weapons, space-based particle beam weapons, everything you can imagine you don't want to see happen will happen if we don't stop this economic phase and this proxy war phase, which is now heating up very, very fast. And it's all tied to the bankers. It's all tied to the fact that the derivatives market and the Glass-Steagall has not been reinstituted. It's tied back to the fact we have a Fed Reserve System that runs our bank rather than the Treasury Department. And the fact that they're actually, under Obama, making the Congress and the Senate vestigial, so they really have no power whatsoever. In fact, even rulings about the Unaffordable Care Act, I call it, the Obamacare, that it basically is unconstitutional, the subsidies. Obama's response was, well, we don't agree with that, so we're just going to not abide by it. So Obama basically ignores everything. He's a constitutional lawyer, so he can break every aspect of the Constitution. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, I'm going to refer to I'm going to loosely quote or refer to the remarks that General Douglas MacArthur made at the surrender of Japan, September 2nd, 1945. At that time, at the end of World War II, General Douglas MacArthur had made the point that we need to devise a new system. among nations. That is, that war among nations is no longer going to function as a way to settle disputes because we are, we had arrived at the age of thermonuclear war, and he foresaw that the next war would be, the next world war would be thermonuclear, and so there would have to be a new system among nations to settle these types of disputes, because as you identified, these economic disputes between the bloc represented by the City of London and Wall Street at this point, which dominates through population control, control of raw materials, and so forth, proxy wars. That system right now, the transatlantic financial system, which is decrepit, is coming into direct conflict with the 80% now, basically, of the world's population that recently got behind Argentina and said no, debts that are predatory, that would require nations to destroy themselves in order to be paid, are not going to be honored. Those are destructive. What's primary is development. And I'm referring to we can get more into this, but I'm referring to the summit of the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, which within last week created a new declaration of their intention to basically have a new financial architecture, or the beginnings of a new financial architecture, an alternative to the IMF, the type of extortion operations that is used by the IMF to enforce these legal decisions, bilking countries out of the money that they would otherwise need for development. So that this now creates a huge potential if the United States were to recognize our own roots, but unfortunately, if Obama continues to stay in the presidency and we've refused to shut down the apparatus that is running this, then we are, staring down the barrel of thermonuclear war.
He's also making us more vulnerable, and I want to break this down to its subparts because you have to break it down. The southern border issue, Obama and the federal government started hiring people 6 months before the crisis in Central and South America of a massive flood of people coming in. Usually it was about 5,000 a year. Now it's over 500,000, approaching 500,000 people in the first seven months of the year. The reason for it is multifactorial, but the first is that Obama wants to break down the borders and flood the nation. He wanted to get the Immigration Act and to make a large subclass of what I call willing Democrats. And we're not talking about thinking Democrats, but willing Democrats that are literally new emigres that are given a carte blanche to come in, no matter if they're criminals or if they're destitute. It doesn't matter what situation they are. Now, I believe in refugees, but we created the refugee problem, and we have independent sources through Tim Alexander and others that the Guatemalan native males were being slaughtered by CIA operatives, which of course is typical of America, to create crises in countries and then to advertise on radio and television that if you come to America, we won't reject you. By the way, these children should have arrived with their parents, not unaccompanied, because our immigration laws say you cannot get citizenship unless you're accompanied by your parent if you're a refugee. I fully believe that refugee status should have meant, rather than Obama calling the Mexican government and various corrupt officials, what they should have done is, rather than letting these children get on called the death train, which is what they call it in Mexico, on the Guatemalan border, they allowed them to have 72-hour visas to literally camp beside the train, jump on the death train, and many of these children died there or on the way or trying to cross the Rio Grande River. So if there really was a humanitarian refugee problem, we should have sent buses down, made sure only mothers with their children were on the bus and not teenagers. They should have never been able to get on for the Mexican government. And now that they're here, they should be sent to military encampments to where they can go to their embassy and be deported to the country. We also have people from the Middle East, from Yemen and elsewhere coming in here that are Muslim, have no business being here at all. And their cells getting ready for some form of terrorism if we start a regional war in the Middle East. That's the facts. Back in a moment. Welcome back, and Bill Roberts is here. Again, just to repeat that information, it's BillRobertsForCongress.com. Congressional number 248-232-6981. Is that correct?
You got it.
So, Bill, we need a kind of a checklist. We always talk about needing Glass-Steagall. We need WAPA. Here in the Southwest, we still have had a significant rain in probably a year. We get a tiny, what I call rainlets. Like we had a sprinkle for maybe a half an hour where I called the clouds spit, but they just kept on going toward the Sierra Mountains and on toward other parts of the country. We see proof that they have been blocking highs with using space-based weather modification weapons so that we don't get any weather from the North Pacific because the air coming in from Fukushima is highly radioactive and lots of cesium, strontium, and other isotopes. We have a global government that basically is hell-bent on reducing the world population through Agenda 21, which is a lie, and the carbon-based idea that human beings are responsible for global warming, which isn't occurring at all. If anything, actually, we're heading into an ice age, according to all the experts like Dr. Habibullah Adamazatov from the Russian Space Agency, Dr. Easterbrook, one of our top scientists, and others. What's going on is we need to worry about space-based gamma bursts, near space objects, solar cycles and coronal mass ejections, and perhaps the approach of a red dwarf star that can have major cataclysmic effects on our planet. And we need to collaborate with Russian and other scientists rather than, sequestering ourselves together and thinking, well, we can be king of the hill by beating the other nations into the dust, when simply the Iranians could take our nation and turn it into a quagmire of self-destructive decay. I mean, we don't need even have Russia interposed. If we decide to take on Iran, they can certainly destroy the remnants of America very thoroughly with biological weapons and EMP weapons. So the idea of war is, and I'm going to put this in tall, bigger than Hollywood sign letters, is damned obsolete. And these bankers that think that they can interpose war so they can maintain their hegemony of economic control, they're nuts. They are psychotic. They need to be put in prison, in a psychiatric prison, so they don't get day passes. This is really bad.
Yeah, and there was a point at which, just going back to this question you raised about the significant lack of rainfall. I mean, we're at a starvation collapse process in the western states, and there was a time at which the proposal that was made by Frank Moss, and I think supported by Robert Kennedy, that we were going to move large parts of what was available as far as the rainfall in the western part of North America from the more northern areas to the southern areas, what you referenced as the NWAPA program. That's not really going to cut it anymore, because the problem is that supposed that there would be a continuation of the total rainfall, which according to scientist out of the University of California at Berkeley, who was looking at the tree rings, has basically said that, look, the recent 200 years have been probably a maximum of rainfall for these parts of the country, and what what we can probably expect is a much lower level of rainfall for the next century or possibly more. That it's not really even.
Yeah, but that cycle actually.
This may be what we're looking at, and that's
well. Actually, I'll interpose some science because we have all kinds of scientific experts. That's a transitional period. We're actually heading into a El Nino La Nina that's supposed to bring more rain temporarily, but the real issue is we're heading into an ice age, and during that cooling period where the temperature of drops in North America 5 to 6 degrees. We actually have an increased rainfall that's likely to take anywhere from 3 to 10 years or more, but it's going to happen. And that rainfall increase still won't make up the difference. So I think that if, for example, we just diverted some of the northern rivers like the Snake River, the Columbia River, and rivers from Canada where it's just dumped into the ocean, that could probably make a very major difference. And also if we had proper water conservation techniques to recharge the Ogallala, and techniques also to not use chemical hydrofracking when we're trying to retrieve oil. There's no need for it. We have non-chemical hydrofracking, and it's called web-based, where we actually put one well down and go in a web in different directions rather than injecting large amounts of chemicals and destroying the water table. I think part of our problem is we don't look at the science of what can be done. We can even use the geoengineering of the weather to actually improve weather distribution patterns so we don't cause either floods or drought. I think, in fact, the globalists want to create these crises so they further cause starvation and move people around. And then also on the other side, they're buying up all the water. There's great evidence that a large of these so-called billionaires have bought into the idea that they want to totally control all drinkable water on the planet. And we're even exporting from places where there's water shortages, like the Northern California area, where water is being exported to China in the midst of a drought. It's crazy. So I think that we're heading into an ice age, which is going to increase the water flow quite a bit, but it's not going to make enough, which 40, 50 years ago, we should have had NWAPA done in 5 or 10 years. Now we're really up against it. Many cities and towns in Texas and elsewhere are less than 30 days away from total drought, where basically there's no damn water at all. And then when that happens, you don't have firefighting, you don't have drinkable water, you don't have toilet flush water, you don't have a society. And of course, if we do have a war with any of these nations that can take out our water pumping capacity, we have water emergency power pumping for maybe 30, 60 days. But you can't replace equipment for 6 months to 3 to 4 years for step-down transformers, and we have no backup water electrical pumping stations for sewage treatment. So after the third or fourth day, they have to cut water supply down to large cities or small cities and towns because it'll back up in your sink, in your toilet, and in your tub. So we have no preparations whatsoever, I see, from the Western world. And by the way, it's not just America and Canada, it's Australia, New Zealand, every Western nation, including Europe. The same stupid ideas are present. And only people on septic fields can actually accept water without the sewage backing up. So, what happened is our global leaders are leading us down a path of devastation, and a post-apocalyptic world should make the Stone Age look like the Sandals Resort. This is not going to be a party. This is going to be worse than Road Warrior by 1,000 times.
This is a perfect test case or case study, a current case study, as to why a very specific approach, or that is, what are the immediate measures that are required to reverse this, what we're looking directly at, which is the potential collapse of civilization, the potential very rapid collapse of our ability to sustain, in this case, the number of people that we have living on this continent.
Yeah, exactly.
This is really the proper way to look at Mr. LaRouche's 4 economic laws.
Let's do that, because I think his rules are brilliant, and they apply across history and time. And when we don't pay attention to history, like the Roman historian Pliny, those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. Mm-hmm. So we're in dire straits now, and people don't even realize, like they say, you don't realize you're up to your neck in the latrine, and you better not breathe in. Bad. Let's look at the 4 laws when we come back. Welcome back, and Bill Roberts from the LaRouche Foundation. Again, the websites are, you want to call the LaRouche Foundation, it's 800-922-2907, 800-922-2907. And by the way, if you have questions, it's 800-259-5791, 800-259-5791. Bill, do you have any specific articles you want to mention today from the LaRouche website? Any specific new statements by Lyndon LaRouche or Helga von Hepp LaRouche?
There is a new statement on the LaRouche PAC website, and let me just... I
pulled up some of the latest ones, of course. The not an option, immediate necessity. The following statement is for immediate action by all associates in all regions, National Caucus of the Labor Committees and its associated practice. And then economists who were really usually stupid. And maybe you can kind of explain what these articles are talking about, and
sure.
And the principles behind them, which basically says people first, sovereign nations first, and let's forget about the idea that the bankers are first, or that they're the too big to fail banks. How about the not too big to jail banks? How's that?
Yeah, and that's really been what the issue has been, is that it's a criminal apparatus, as Viktor Ivanov, the Russian anti-drug czar pointed out a number of years ago that this financial system simply wouldn't have enough liquidity to keep turning over all of its bad gambling debts if it were not for the proceeds from the international drug trade money laundering, which is absolutely true. And if you think about the fact that we are now sanctioning Viktor Ivanov, that is, President Obama sanctioned him personally, as if he has bank accounts in the United States anyway. I mean, most of these guys probably just laughed off these personal sanctions. But you think about it from the standpoint of this is a man who as part of his organization, offered to collaborate with the United States and other countries on eradicating the heroin epidemic coming out of Afghanistan, which has brought the price of heroin down to the point where there's a rash of heroin epidemics in places like where I am, the suburbs of Detroit, where there's multiple heroin overdoses a week in every township and little place around Detroit. And,
let me explain the money flow of reason why the drug trade is there, because they could just print the money. They don't have to have a drug trade.
The reason is has a purpose to it from the standpoint of the British Empire.
Well,
but it's definitely the case that they want the money. And they want the drugs at the same time.
Wanting the money is actually the least of their issues. I'll tell you what it is. It's an accounting issue. And this is something most people don't realize. The original opium wars, of course, Britain ran out of silver and so on. They were pulling out of places like Argentina and Mexico, etc. So what they did is they decided, well, we'll use heroin and we'll force the Chinese to accept heroin bales as exchange for goods. And they created the opium wars. And, of course, when the physical war happened, Britain had much more advanced guns and weapon systems, so they overwhelmed the Chinese, and the Chinese were totally taken aback that their giant empire that had never been defeated for thousands of years was crushed by the British. The real situation right now has nothing to do with wanting the money. That's the least of their problems. They could print that out off on the printing press. The real issue is accounting. And what it is that $2 trillion a year, which is the U.S.-British drug trade, is put into black op projects. It pays Bechtel Corporation and other projects that go underground, build underground cities, space-based weapons platforms, all kinds of alternative technology, human genetic engineering, super soldiers, brown-based super drone warrior systems, all kinds of weird stuff that requires trillions of dollars. I mean, the average is every 7 weeks there's a new underground city between really around 6 to 12 cubic miles in size under the United States continental territory every 7 weeks. And what America's doing is they are diverting this money. They're laundering, quote, legally, because they have legal loopholes that allow laundering of money. So the fourth richest man in the world is a Mexican, who they could easily zip in with Delta Force and take the guy. We could easily go into Guatemala and these other countries and clean up the drug cartels there in Colombia. But we don't, because we want to launder the money, primarily because, for accounting purposes, we don't want Congress and Senate oversight of the fact that we have trillions of dollars coming illegally through the CIA to fund off-world space projects, underground cities, and weird technology for a bifurcated technological civilization. That's what we've been doing for 70 years. It started with the OAS, which literally branched off and formed the CIA. We were just a branch of the British, if you want to call it, secret agencies. Those secret agencies have all amalgamated together under George Bush Sr. under a project called Project Omega that literally now oversees all secret agencies of all agencies on Earth, including the KGB, GRU, Brazilian Security Police, the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, etc. So the least of their reasons is money. They want to also destroy the populations in the central cities, so they actually have a racist population reduction policy to sterilize and destroy the family and the population. So to rot the core out of cities, they bring in the drugs. It is a form of racist destruction of families and population. So it has multiple agendas. They want the population reduced. I mean, it's right on the Georgia Guidestones. It's on the World Watch Institute. It's on all of these documents that are present. That's why they want to promulgate war. They would like to see a population reduction of at least 90%, perhaps 95%. So they want no more than 20 million people in all of the United States after it all settles. They want a population of the whole world no more than 200 million. And they want to control that population so there's zero population growth, and anything new in terms of a servant class is created by genetic engineering in a lab. That's what the future is, the dark future of the globalist maniacs who are no more than 5 to 20 years away from the singularity of human life extension, where basically the idea of aging or senescence will be wiped out. And I know, because I'm one of the senior researchers that's checking research literature all over the world, presenting papers at the Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine with Dr. Ron Klatz, and we're no more than 5 to 20 years max away from the biological singularity of zero senescence. In other words, no more aging. The only way you'll die is if you have an extreme accident, or someone murders you, or you fall from a building, an accident. But other than that, war, you're not going to die. So I heard a phone line there. Do we have Tim Alexander, and do we still have Bill Roberts? Let's see, reconnect Bill. Okay, let's reconnect Bill. Tim, tell us what's going on. What's the latest news?
Giving away all of our secrets, and we're coming after you, Mr. Deagle, Dr. Deagle.
It's too late. The secrets are out, even if I'm dead. In fact, the danger to killing me was that people will believe. The most common thing out of the 2 million hits that people hit when they Google Dr. Deagle is, number one, the state of Colorado accuses me of being a murderer, and they're the murderers because they put people in danger, occupationally and otherwise. The very fact is that if I was terminated, which is not going to happen, people would believe me. In fact, that's actually one of the least things that's likely to happen, because if I was terminated, which is why I tell people if they're a whistleblower, blow your whistle loud. Because if you try to hide it and they think you know something and you're not blogging or talking about it, you're a dead duck. But if actually something bad happens to you and they know that it looks anomalous, the real danger is that people in their own group, billionaires, millionaires, people who want to keep their wealth and don't want to live in an underground hotel and commit suicide after 30 days, those people are going to get really pissed if something happens to a messenger that tells the truth and wants civilization not to turn into a hellhole.
When the nightmare you were describing is a very Luciferian demonic dream.
Right. It's a wet dream of Satan.
Yeah, well, look, as far as life extension, we already have it. It's called eternity with God.
No, I'm talking about biological. You see, Satan always perverts things. Biological life extension, where even the years of the patriarchs, 1,000 years or more, is very doable. We are so close to the idea of human senescence being wiped out because we know that aging, whether it's telomere lengthening with things like astragalus or anti-age max technologies and so on, we're here very close to mitochondrial protofection, where we basically don't have mitochondrial decay anymore, to stem cell research. We are very close to the idea that human life extension, people in the future will have what's called life extension insurance, not health insurance, where they'll have literally real-time monitoring to central databases that'll monitor their bodily functions and intervene. You'll have literally laboratories where they'll put you suspended animation for a couple of days a year. Welcome back, and so we have just a few more minutes here with Bill Roberts, and we want to mention again he's a congressional candidate in the Democratic Party. I think it's August, is it 5th or 6th that you're coming into your 5th, okay, and it's BillRobertsForCongress.com. The congressional office is 248-232-6981. And Tim, just encapsulate in a minute, because I want to have you come back on and discuss this in much more detail tomorrow, and perhaps even on a live stream channel. But can you encapsulate in a minute or two exactly what the major news break is?
Done an emergency recall of the State Duma, the Parliament, from vacation. And they're going to meet tomorrow in an unscheduled session, and it is on the Ukrainian situation. So
right. Well, what I heard is that the Russians were not ready till the middle of the month, announced the middle of the month, on the ground to actually make an operational activity that would deal with Ukraine. Now they're going to bring the Duma, so obviously Putin's not going to act like a dictator. He's going to collaborate with his fellow members of the Duma. And as a result, it means that whatever action Russia takes is going to be pretty devastating. We already know that the BRICS and the $100 billion, which is the first down payment they said for their own International Monetary Fund alternative and World Bank, this is killing the British banking system. The American dollar is going to go into a tailspin. Now, here's what will stop it, though. What will stop it is two things: the peace treaty and the mark of the beast. That's what's coming. Validation, what's we call authentication currency, which requires biometrics, and a world banking structure that allows no cash in your pocket. It's all electronic digits in their supercomputer.
They will own you because all they have to do is press a button and every penny you have.
That is their only, the derivatives markets collapse is the only solution. That solution, by the way, in the Bible says will last 3.5 years. What we're seeing right now is they want to wipe out the nation states completely. That's Obama's plan with the borders, not to help little babies that are devastated by their fathers being killed in native Guatemala. The situation is not to try to improve the Immigration or the DREAM Act. It's to destroy borders, not improving the immigration process to streamline it, which should have been done years ago, and could have been done in the first term of Obama when he had both the Congress and the Senate in his hand. He didn't want to do that because the bankers don't want peace. They don't want strong nations. They want destroyed nations. They want destroyed economies. They want Argentina, save everywhere. They want to be able to strip a nation of all its assets.
They hate America, and they're planning our destruction. And,
well, they're doing it to Argentina. They're going to Argentinize, which means silver. That's what the name means. Bill, give us your analysis of the last, where you see this trajectory going, because I see, if we don't get Obama out, probably by the midterm elections when the Democrats are devastated, that Obama's going to try to create enough chaos that we'll have a war in the Middle East, economic collapse, and probably martial law, with many of the people that have come here that are gang members or Muslims that arrived doing a lot of terroristic activity, especially if we start a ground war and we have Iranians releasing biological weapons and EMP weapons against us. We're going to have a hell of a year. Next 2015, if this pans out, we don't get rid of Obama, is going to be the Latin term is an annus horribilis, which is a horrible year. We're going to really have hell to pay if we don't get him out.
Guys, I have to go, but continue with this conversation. Sounds really good. God bless.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Tim.
Okay.
Okay. So now, where do you see this going, Bill? Because I'm really desperate to get people to kind of wake up that the LaRouche Foundation has a lot of solutions to the problem. Glass-Steagall, the idea of strengthening our financial system to have the Treasury take it over, the idea of NWAPA, many other ideas, these 4 principles that LaRouche mentions. If we don't institute these and get rid of Obama, and not just him, this entire, we call progressive, international, what I call fascist organization, fusing all the world transnational corporations and the secret elite and the secret agencies are all in one giant cabal. And now we have a fractionation where we're approaching World War III. We're in the final economic stages before things really blow.
Yes. Everyone needs to contact their member of Congress immediately, and recess needs to be canceled. See, at this point, Congress is planning on going on recess at the end of next week. Now, right. I probably don't have to tell everyone why that's a really, really bad idea.
Especially when they're recalling the Duma, and the Duma means Russia is getting ready for war.
Yeah, so Congress should take take note of the fact that they should immediately cancel the recess and initiate the process of impeachment of President Obama. Because what is happening right now is that the British Empire is responding to the fact that what's been set into motion is the demise of their system. And this is signaled by what happened at the BRICS Fortaleza, Brazil declaration just in the past week, which is that 80% of the planet decided that they're changing the rules. They're changing the rules of the global financial system by backing up nations that would otherwise be isolated and would cave in to usurious debt payments. And so what this means is that as soon as that happened, you had the immediate deployment of provocations, such as what happened in Ukraine, which immediately Obama and the British started saying that this was Russian-backed militias in eastern Ukraine without waiting for the black box, without waiting for the evidence. You also had the deployment of Bibi Netanyahu, sending the Israeli military into Gaza, which has now mounted a death toll of over 500 people, many of whom are just civilians, women, and children.
Well over that. I mean, that number, we could easily inflate to 1,000 or more. We have women waving white flags on wheelchairs being blown to bits. and schools for the disabled, and the third and fifth floor of the third largest hospital in Gaza being blown out by an Israeli tank. There's nothing.
Yeah.
What's to gain by blowing out several floors of a hospital with people in the hospital beds being killed?
The destruction of the ability for a unity government in Palestine, which means, of course, as has happened in the warfare conditions of other Middle Eastern countries, the chaos tends to create the conditions for the explosive recruitment and deployment of the most extreme jihadi Al-Qaeda elements, in these areas, leading to further chaos and conditions of which would bring
Hamas was originally
countries in and lead to World War III.
Hamas was originally trained and set up many years ago by Shin Bet. And of course, to have control
by the Netanyahu government, actually.
Right, Netanyahu government. But basically, to make sure that the opposition, it's almost like the words of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, the head of Russia. Mm-hmm. I shall be busy about organizing my enemies. In other words, the Israelis organize their enemies to make certain they have valid enemies to justify inhumane policies. For example, I've mentioned this numerous times over the years. If Israel is really worried about rocket systems coming in from Iran and elsewhere in these tunnels from Egypt, just go down there with a surgical group and close off the tunnels and open up some way of validating real commerce so they can bring across, sheep and goods and clothes and other things, not through a tunnel, but an open area where they can actually do, metal testing and other things, just like a security check in an airport. That could have been done years ago. Instead of taking tanks in, number one, is dangerous for the Israeli military because they're going to die trying to go into an area with people with tank-killing rocket-propelled grenades. So it puts the Israeli military in grave danger to act extreme. It makes the Islamic terrorists justify that they're going to get more extreme. And, of course, eventually Israel will be pummeled with 200,000 rockets, not just with bottle rockets, but serious payload rockets carrying fuel air bombs, biological weapons, and dirty nuclear bombs. And Israel will cease to exist. So this is a problem. And Israel, of course, will use what's called the Samson option, which is 800 to 1,200 high-yield nuclear weapons to every Islamic city within 7,000 to 10,000 miles, including European cities, and Russia, causing a thermonuclear global exchange that will wipe out pretty well all of humanity if you manage to survive. As I said, the living will envy the dead.
If the United States Congress wants to stop this bloodshed, what they've got to do is remain in session, convene the immediate impeachment of President Barack Obama, and then move to put in place the measures which will effectively cancel the British Empire by instituting LaRouche's 4-step program. And this is available on the LaRouche PAC website. Yeah. It delineates what must be done following the reimplementation of Glass-Steagall, which, by the way, is growing and gaining a lot of steam. But there has to be the creation of a federal credit system. That credit has got to be used for the initiation of projects and other issuances of credit, which will tend to create highly productive work in the United States, bringing the American workforce back into the type of work